Did you know the Roman soldier who killed Jesus Christ became one of Christianity's first martyrs? At Golgotha in 33 AD, Centurion Longinus drove his spear deep into Christ's side to confirm his death. He was a hardened executioner who had overseen countless crucifixions without emotion. But then something impossible happened. Darkness swallowed the noon sky, earthquakes shook the ground beneath his feet. As Christ's blood touched his hands, Longinus felt his sight restore and his heart change forever. The man who had just killed the Son of God was instantly converted. He secretly joined the underground Christian movement, spreading the very faith he once persecuted. When Roman authorities discovered his conversion, they arrested him immediately. They demanded he renounce his new beliefs, but Longinus refused. His punishment was brutal. They gouged out his eyes with burning irons, then beheaded him. The executioner had become the executed, dying for the same man he had killed. His spear became Christianity's most sacred relic. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Inca brain surgery. First, Inca surgeons had a 90% success rate for skull drilling, while medieval European doctors only managed 10%. They were performing brain surgery when Europeans were still bloodletting with leeches. Second, they used coca leaves as natural anesthesia and operated with obsidian blades sharper than modern scalpels. These volcanic glass tools could cut through bone and tissue with incredible precision. Third, archaeological evidence shows patients surviving multiple brain surgeries with clear bone regrowth around the surgical sites. Some skulls reveal up to 7 separate operations on the same person. Fourth, they developed these techniques specifically to relieve cranial pressure from head injuries sustained in warfare. Warriors could return to battle after having their skulls opened and repaired. Fifth, here's the mind-blowing part. Some Inca medical techniques weren't matched by European medicine until the 20th century, yet Europeans called them primitive savages while their own patients died from basic infections. What if Napoleon's reinforcements had arrived on time at Waterloo in 1815? A French victory would have shattered the British Empire before its peak. Without British naval dominance, the Industrial Revolution would have stayed locked in Europe. America would have developed differently, possibly remaining fragmented without British trade networks. The Victorian era would never have existed. Africa and Asia would have seen French and Russian colonization instead of British. But here's the unexpected part. Without a strong Britain to balance European power, German unification might never have happened. No unified Germany means no World War I or II. Millions of lives could have been saved. The global language would be French, not English. Technology would have advanced along completely different paths. One delayed cavalry charge changed everything at Waterloo. That single battle shaped our entire modern world. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Tutankhamun's mysterious death. First, CT scans revealed the boy king had a fractured skull and missing ribs when he died at just 19 years old. This wasn't natural death, it was violent. Second, his burial was so rushed that his mummy's wrappings were still wet with resin when they sealed his tomb. Someone wanted him underground fast. Third, his wife Ankhesenamun completely disappeared from all records immediately after his death. She was never found or mentioned again. Fourth, his vizier A married Tutankhamun's widow within months and declared himself pharaoh. This broke every Egyptian succession law that existed. Fifth, recent DNA analysis revealed the most shocking truth of all. Tutankhamun's parents were siblings, and his own children were stillborn. The genetic complications from generations of royal inbreeding may have ended Egypt's most famous dynasty. The Golden Pharaoh's legacy wasn't just cut short by murder, it was doomed from birth. Did you know that one military tactic accidentally killed a third of Europe's population? In 1346, Mongol forces were laying siege to the trading port of Kaffa in Crimea. For months, the city walls held strong against their attacks. Then plague struck the Mongol camp, killing soldiers by the hundreds. But their commander had a twisted idea. He ordered his men to load catapults with the infected corpses and launch them over the city walls. The rotting bodies crashed into streets and homes, spreading disease instantly. Terrified Italian merchants fled the city by ship, but they carried infected fleas in their cargo. Within weeks, the plague reached Messina, then Genoa, then spread across every trade route in Europe. Victims developed black swellings, vomited blood, blood and died within days. Between 75 and 200 million people perished. Entire villages were wiped out, feudalism collapsed, and labor shortages sparked the Renaissance. One act of biological warfare accidentally reshaped civilization forever. Did you know that Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who conquered most of Europe, was slowly murdered by his own bedroom wallpaper? In 1821, Napoleon died on the remote island of St. Helena after 6 years of exile. Doctors declared the cause as stomach cancer, case closed. But in the 1960s, scientists decided to test strands of his hair using new forensic technology. What they found was shocking: lethal levels of arsenic, enough to kill a man slowly over months. The mystery deepened until investigators examined his prison quarters on St. Helena. The walls were covered in beautiful green wallpaper, decorated with an elegant floral pattern. That green pigment was Scheele's green, made with pure arsenic compounds. In the humid island climate, the wallpaper began releasing toxic fumes into the air. Every night, Napoleon breathed in poison while he slept. His servants unknowingly dusted the deadly walls daily, making it worse. The emperor, who survived countless battlefields, was killed by interior decoration. Modern forensic science had solved a 140-year-old murder mystery. The killer was hiding in plain sight on his bedroom walls. What if Xerxes' massive Persian army had actually crushed the 300 Spartans and conquered all of Greece in 480 BC? The immediate consequences would have been staggering. No golden age of Athens, no birth of democracy, no philosophical schools of Plato or Aristotle. Instead of Greek logic spreading through Alexander's empire, Persian Zoroastrianism would have dominated the ancient world. Rome would have developed completely differently without Greek cultural influence to shape its laws and thinking. But here's the most shocking consequence: Western civilization's entire intellectual foundation would have been Eastern mysticism rather than logical reasoning. The Greek philosophical framework that helped Christianity spread and evolve might never have existed. Without Greek concepts of debate and rational thought, Christianity itself could have remained a small Middle Eastern sect. This single battle at Thermopylae didn't just determine Greece's fate, it decided whether human civilization would be built on Eastern autocracy or Western democratic ideals. One battle, two completely different worlds. Did you know 500-year-old Inca stone walls in Cusco survived massive earthquakes that completely destroyed Spanish colonial buildings built right on top of them? These ancient engineers cut massive granite blocks so precisely that you can't fit a knife blade between them. No mortar, no metal tools, just perfect stone-on-stone construction. Archaeological evidence shows these walls actually flex during earthquakes instead of breaking apart. The Incas used interlocking stone techniques that let the entire structure move as one unit. They achieved this incredible feat using only bronze tools and rope, somehow moving 100-ton blocks across treacherous mountain terrain. When Spanish conquistadors first saw these walls, they were so amazed they refused to believe humans built them. They claimed only demons or giants could have created such perfect stonework. The most shocking part, modern engineers with all our technology still can't replicate their earthquake-resistant techniques. These ancient builders created architecture more advanced than anything we build today. 5 centuries later, their walls still stand while our modern buildings crumble. Did you know Viking warriors literally turned into unstoppable killing machines using deadly mushrooms? In the 9th century, Viking berserkers struck terror across medieval Europe with their inhuman strength and fearlessness. Before battle, these warriors would foam at the mouth, bite their shields, and enter a trance-like state. Saxon chronicles describe berserkers charging into combat with arrows and spears already piercing their bodies, yet feeling no pain. They would tear enemies apart with bare hands, continuing to fight with mortal wounds that should have dropped any normal man. Modern researchers discovered their shocking secret. They consumed Amanita muscaria mushrooms before battle. These red-capped fungi contain powerful psychoactive compounds that caused hallucinations and complete pain immunity. In their drugged state, berserkers experienced no fear or physical limitations, becoming living nightmares on the battlefield. But when the mushroom effects wore off, the horrific truth emerged. Many berserkers collapsed and died from wounds they couldn't feel during combat. This drug-fueled warrior cult helped establish Viking military dominance and terrorized an entire continent. Did you know that one man's murder literally started the path to the Civil War? In 1837, Elijah Lovejoy was a Presbyterian minister turned newspaper editor in Alton, Illinois. He used his press to publish anti-slavery articles that enraged local mobs. 3 times, angry crowds destroyed his printing equipment, but he kept rebuilding. When the fourth press arrived, Lovejoy and his supporters armed themselves to protect it. They barricaded inside a warehouse as hundreds of pro-slavery rioters gathered outside. The mob set the building on fire and waited. When Lovejoy stepped outside to assess the damage, 5 bullets tore through his chest. He collapsed and died instantly, becoming the first white martyr of the abolitionist movement. His death shocked the North. John Quincy Adams called it cold-blooded murder in Congress. But most importantly, a young man named John Brown witnessed the aftermath. Lovejoy's martyrdom inspired Brown's violent anti-slavery raids that would directly lead to the Civil War. One editor's death changed everything. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the Blood Eagle, the most brutal execution in Viking history. First, this wasn't just killing someone. They cut the victim's back open while alive, broke their ribs, then pulled their lungs out through the wounds. The lungs would flutter like wings as the person slowly died. Second, only the most hated enemies faced this fate. Viking kings who were betrayed or murdered. Their killers got the Blood Eagle. It was reserved for traitors and oath breakers. Third, we found proof this actually happened. Skeletons discovered in England show the exact rib damage described in Viking sagas. This wasn't just a scary story. Fourth, victims had to stay silent through the entire torture. Screaming would dishonor their death and shame their family forever. Many bit their tongues to avoid crying out. Fifth, here's the mind-blowing part. The Blood Eagle was a sacrifice to Odin himself. The spread wings mimicked his ravens, and dying this way guaranteed the victim would reach Valhalla. Even enemies deserved warrior's paradise. Did you know the world's first military academy wasn't created in Europe, but by Ottoman janissaries in the 14th century? These elite soldiers revolutionized warfare centuries before European armies caught up. The Ottomans recruited Christian boys through the Devshirme system, converting them to Islam and giving them rigorous education. They learned mathematics, languages, and advanced warfare tactics that no European force could match. While European knights relied on birth and nobility, janissaries promoted based on merit alone. They wore standardized uniforms, received systematic firearms training, and even had pension systems. Europe wouldn't develop these innovations until the 1700s. During Ottoman sieges, European military observers desperately studied janissary methods, trying to understand their superiority. These soldiers created the first true standing professional army, with discipline and organization that seemed impossible. Their tactical innovation spread across continents. Today, prestigious military academies from West Point to Sandhurst still use organizational principles first developed by these remarkable Ottoman warriors. The foundation of modern military education began in Constantinople, not Europe. What if the Western Roman Empire never fell in 476 AD and successfully repelled every barbarian invasion? Instead of collapse, Rome would have continued advancing for another 1,000 years. No dark ages would have plagued Europe. Classical knowledge would never have been lost. Roman engineers would have kept building massive aqueducts, roads, and monuments across the continent. Without medieval Christianity's dominance, science would have flourished uninterrupted. The Islamic Golden Age might never have happened, since there would be no power vacuum for Islamic scholars to fill. Rome's existing trade networks would make the age of exploration completely unnecessary. The Renaissance would be pointless because classical knowledge was never forgotten. By 1000 AD, continuous Roman innovation could have sparked an industrial revolution. Steam engines, electricity, and advanced metallurgy would emerge centuries early. With unified European resources and Roman engineering prowess, space exploration could have begun by the year 1000. One successful defense changed everything. Rome's survival would have launched humanity to the stars a millennium ahead of schedule. Did you know that in 797 AD, a Byzantine empress ordered her own son to be blinded and castrated to steal his throne? Empress Irene had already poisoned countless rivals and eliminated anyone who stood in her way, but her most shocking act was against Constantine VI, her own flesh and blood. She had him dragged from his palace, held down by guards, and brutally mutilated to ensure he could never rule. The screams echoed through the imperial chambers as red-hot irons destroyed his eyes. This broke 4 centuries of male succession in the Byzantine Empire, but her cruelty didn't stop there. She burned Patriarch Nicephorus alive for opposing her religious views. Her former ally Starakios was slowly roasted over an open fire in the Hippodrome while thousands watched in horror. She ruled through pure terror, becoming the first woman to hold absolute power in Byzantium. Her reign of blood finally ended when she was overthrown and exiled. She died alone in poverty, forgotten by the empire she had terrorized. Did you know that in 1092 AD, one of history's most feared assassins walked calmly up to a powerful minister and stabbed him with a poisoned dagger? Nizam al-Mulk, the mighty vizier of the Seljuk Empire, was traveling in his caravan when a stranger approached. The man seemed harmless, just another traveler on the road, but he was a follower of Hassani Sabah, leader of the Nizari Ismailis. Without warning, the assassin plunged his blade deep into the vizier's chest and disappeared into the crowd. This was just the beginning of a reign of terror that would paralyze empires for centuries. From their mountain fortress of Alamut in Persia, the assassins sent sleeper agents into enemy courts. These men would spend years gaining trust, posing as servants, guards, even priests. When the moment came, they struck without hesitation, knowing they would die as martyrs. Kings and sultans became prisoners in their own palaces, too terrified to venture outside. The assassins had invented something the world had never seen before. Modern terrorism was born in medieval Persia. Here are 5 things you didn't know about Aztec human sacrifice. First, during festivals for the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, priests would skin victims alive. They wore the rotting flesh for 20 days straight as it decayed on their bodies. Second, in 1487 AD at Tenochtitlan, archaeologists found evidence of over 20,000 people sacrificed in just 4 days. The blood flowed like rivers through the temple steps. Third, Aztec priests used obsidian knives sharper than modern surgical tools to cut out beating hearts. These still pulsing organs were offered directly to their gods while warm. Fourth, victims were kept in wooden cages for months beforehand. They were fed hallucinogenic mushrooms to keep them calm and compliant during the ritual. Fifth, when Spanish conquistadors first heard these reports, they refused to believe them. The accounts seemed too extreme to be real, until they discovered massive skull racks at the Templo Mayor containing over 136,000 human skulls. The scale was beyond anything Europe had ever imagined. What if the Persian Empire had crushed Athens at Marathon in 490 BC? Darius's massive army would have swept through Greece, ending democracy before it truly began. No golden age of Athens means no Socrates, no Plato, no Aristotle. The entire foundation of Western philosophy would never exist. Rome would develop without Greek influence, becoming just another militaristic empire. Persian fire worship would spread across the Mediterranean instead of later philosophical thought. But here's the shocking part: individual rights would never be conceived. The Persian model of divine monarchy would become the global standard. Caste systems would dominate every civilization for thousands of years. Without Greek logical reasoning, the scientific method might never emerge. Human technological progress could be delayed by millennia. No concept of citizen participation, just subjects serving god kings. One battle at Marathon didn't just save Athens, it determined whether humanity would embrace citizen democracy or eternal autocracy. Did you know Hannibal once turned venomous snakes into the world's first biological weapons? In 184 BC, during a desperate naval battle, Carthaginian forces did something unprecedented. They catapulted clay pots filled with poisonous serpents onto Roman ships. Hannibal's men had collected thousands of deadly snakes from North African deserts, storing them in specially designed ceramic containers. When these pots shattered on impact, chaos erupted instantly. Roman sailors, facing writhing venomous creatures on their decks, abandoned ship rather than fight. Entire crews jumped overboard in terror, leaving their vessels to the Carthaginians. Archaeological evidence from Mediterranean shipwrecks still shows snake bones mixed with pottery fragments. Roman historians describe the panic as unlike anything they'd ever witnessed. Their superior naval forces had no counter-strategy for this unprecedented terror tactic. This ancient biological warfare gave Carthage decisive victories against Rome's mighty fleets. Military innovation born from desperation had created something 2,000 years ahead of its time. Sometimes the most desperate moments produce the most brilliant strategies. Did you know that a Persian prince once fed his own brother alive to wild beasts just to become king? In 465 BC, Prince Xerxes watched his father Darius I writhing in agony after their private dinner. The king clutched his stomach, foam spilling from his mouth as mysterious pains tore through him. But this wasn't natural death, it was murder. Xerxes had secretly met with the palace eunuch Aspametris, planning every detail. They had laced the wine with arsenic, then forged documents to cover their tracks. With his father dead, Xerxes faced a problem. His brothers also wanted the throne, so he hunted them down one by one. First Hystaspes, poisoned at a feast, then Macystes, stabbed in his sleep. But his youngest brother received the worst fate of all. Xerxes had him thrown into a pit of starving lions while still breathing. The screams echoed through the palace as the beasts tore him apart. This brutal precedent destroyed the Persian Empire from within as future kings followed his bloody example. What if Caesar's bodyguards had actually stopped the assassins on the Ides of March? Julius Caesar would have lived to launch his planned eastern campaigns against Parthia. Within 2 years, Roman legions would have conquered modern-day Iran and pushed into India. Without Caesar's death, there would be no Augustus, no civil wars, just continuous expansion eastward. Roman armies would have kept marching, reaching Central Asia by 30 BC. Here's where it gets incredible. Rome would have encountered China 1500 years early. Instead of separate empires, we might have seen one massive Roman-Chinese hybrid stretching across Eurasia. Christianity would have developed completely differently under Caesar's continued rule. Jesus' crucifixion story would have unfolded in a stable empire, not the political chaos that followed Caesar's death. Roman engineering and Chinese innovation would have merged centuries ahead of schedule. By the 1st century AD, Caesar's empire could have spanned from Britain to Japan. One man's survival would have created the world's first truly global superpower. History's entire timeline would have shifted forever. Did you know that Napoleon bound his favorite books using the skin of his executed enemies? In 2018, Harvard scientists made a shocking discovery in Napoleon's personal library. His treasured copy of Machiavelli's The Prince was bound in human skin. This wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. During the French Revolution, aristocrats had started the practice of anthropodermic bibliopagy, binding books in human flesh. But Napoleon took it further than anyone else. His personal physician, Dr. Dominique Jean Larrey, supervised the entire process during military campaigns. After defeating Austrian generals and Prussian officers, Napoleon would personally select which enemies deserved this fate. Their skin was carefully removed, then tanned using human fat in a gruesome process. Each book became a trophy, a reminder of his dominance over the dead. But the most horrific discovery was yet to come. His complete works of Voltaire were bound in Marie Antoinette's skin, harvested after her execution. Even in death, Napoleon's enemies served his intellectual pursuits. Did you know that samurai invented suicide bombing 700 years before World War II? In 1281 AD, samurai warrior Takazaki Suenaga faced an impossible situation. 140,000 Mongol invaders had just landed on the shores of Kyushu, outnumbering Japanese defenders 10-1. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Suenaga strapped gunpowder stolen from Chinese ships to his horse and charged straight into enemy lines. The explosion tore through Mongol ranks, sending limbs and armor fragments across the beach. This wasn't just one man's crazy idea. The Hojo regent turned it into organized strategy. Samurai began loading themselves with explosives and charging into formations. Bodies exploded among enemy troops, creating chaos and terror. In just a week, over 300 samurai died in these suicide attacks. Their sacrifice bought precious time until a typhoon destroyed the Mongol fleet. This 13th century tactic became the blueprint for kamikaze pilots centuries later. The samurai had created history's first recorded suicide warfare. Did you know that elite soldiers once strangled their own sultan with a bowstring while he begged for mercy? In 1622, the Ottoman Empire's most powerful military force turned against their ruler. The Janissaries were Christian-born slaves, trained from childhood to be the Sultan's personal guards. But 18-year-old Sultan Osman II made a fatal mistake. He tried to replace them with Arab troops, threatening their power and wealth. The Janissaries erupted in coordinated riots, controlling Constantinople's streets completely. These weren't just any soldiers. They had already removed 3 previous sultans from power. On May 20th, they stormed the palace chambers where Osman was hiding. They dragged the terrified young sultan from his hiding place and tortured him for hours. His mother watched helplessly as they slowly strangled him with a silk bowstring. Then they displayed his broken body publicly and installed their own chosen puppet ruler. This brutal act marked the beginning of Ottoman decline. The empire never recovered from these internal military coups that followed.